Hello, Stephen Wisdom here. I'm a certified financial planner and I have a business in Dallas, Texas. I help people with their finances. I try to simplify their situation. I've been doing it since 1982. An interesting field. There's always something changing. There's always something that we're having to learn and to adjust to. And I became a Christian when I was 9 years old. I was at church camp, and a redheaded counselor. I went down front after the meeting was over with, and he asked me if I'd like to receive the Lord, and I said, yeah, I really would. So we received the Lord right there at the church camp there out in Canby, Oregon, and many, many years ago. And I grew up in Oregon, and back in 1956, the spring of 56, my mother went to the doctor and said she was not feeling too well. She thought she was sick, and he says, well, you're not sick, you're pregnant. And so about 8 months later, I came along, and just really so thankful for what the Lord has done in my life. I moved to Dallas, Texas in 1981, and during my upbringing, sports was always a big part of my life. I was co-captain of the track team, school record holder for a short time of the high jump. I was a high jumper. I went 6'3" 3/4 in high school, and then 6'6" 1/2" in college. And so that was the extent of my athletic career. But I moved down to Texas in '81 and started working with my uncle, Don Spear. Many of you know him. He had a financial planning practice, and so I started working there, and he offered me a spot, and I've been helping people ever since, and have my own business now. But it was just my story really is not something of any big dramatic conversion from a horrible life of crime or anything like that. That was that just wasn't my calling, the avenue that I came to know the Lord. I was raised in the church, became a Christian at a relatively early age, and this doesn't mean that my life's been perfect. It certainly has had its challenges and ups and downs, and I just thank the Lord for His forgiveness and for His mercy. One of the highlights of my life that I can remember is in 15 years ago, in the end of October of 2004, I gave my brother my right kidney. He was a diabetic. He'd been a diabetic since he was 20, and that was been quite a long time. And he had gotten came down with diabetes in the military. He was in the Marine Corps. He was actually scheduled to ship out to Vietnam and came down with diabetes. And so he ended up, his battle was against diabetes after that. So for the longest time, he really had a hard time, and he'd been on dialysis for the last couple of years before the transplant, and he'd had a pretty tough go of it with the way the diabetes was. And so I gave him. He was a candidate for transplant, so I gave him my right kidney, and it just worked out fantastic. He got 9 years and 2 months of not having to do dialysis. He passed away in 2014. It was really a tough deal, but the Lord called him home, and I just am so thankful. The Saturday before he passed away, I was up in Portland. I'd flown up there to see him, and his buddy that he went into the Marine Corps with was with him. He came in, and I told him that, I said, we're going to have to let him go. There's just nothing more they can do. They've tried everything, and he'd been in the hospital. The veterans were just so good to him, the VA facilities, but it was time to let him go. There's nothing more they could do, and his buddy was pretty choked up, so he came back in, and I remember him holding his hand, and he said, Butch, I said, I know we've talked about this many times. I said, I know you've received the Lord, and I know that we're all going to be in heaven. You may beat us there by just a day or two, or it seemed like a day or two, but we'll all be there. And if it wasn't for that, I was just so thankful to hear that from Mel, for him to say that in front of Butch. And I know he's with the Lord, and I'm just so grateful for God's mercy and God's forgiveness in his life. I just thank God that he'll be there, and along with many of our loved ones. Another kind of a big point in my life was with my business. In 1989, we were switching companies. We were switching broker dealers. It's kind of the immediate authority above us, and it was the company that we were with was we knew they weren't going to last very long, so we decided we had to switch over to another company. And about that time, I had been dating a girl for about 6 months, and it had really been a pretty much more advanced relationship than I ever dreamed of, and all the feelings and everything. And she took off to be a flight attendant for flight attendant school, and so she'd been up there for a few months, and we were about to switch broker dealers, and we were owed a bunch of money, and we weren't being paid, and so that, and we're still owed the money, and so that was a pretty big tough setback for us. And along at the same time, I found out I'd been replaced by somebody else, by this girl that was off to flight attendant school, and so that was kind of a real shock to me. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just soaking wet with sweat. I just couldn't believe all these things were happening all at the same time. But I thank the Lord now that I've got a wonderful wife. We've been married for 14 years in another week or so, and fantastic girl. And also the company I'm with, we had moved to another company, and this company is actually considered one of the very top companies in our investment field, and I've been with them for 30 years. And so I just thank the Lord for being able to say that, because I could have gone with other firms and we could have had even more troubles. And so I just praise the Lord for that. But my message to you is really just a case of don't underestimate God's forgiveness. Look at the two thieves on the cross. One mocked Jesus. The other one said, don't you know who this man is? He's innocent. Remember me. And Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. And what a fantastic story of God's love and God's forgiveness in our lives. Even though we're the ones that default on the agreement, the Lord, He always comes through, and He never lets us down. He always is able to fulfill His promises. We just need to try to keep ours. And so I just want to thank the Lord for the forgiveness He's extended me in my life, and for the ability to help other people, certainly financially, but and otherwise, to give them some sense of security. But the ultimate security is in Jesus. There's no other security like that for eternity.